All right, y'all. Welcome to a major milestone here in the Medicine Mondays Lunch and Learn journey. This is the 400th podcast episode that we'll be recording. I'm not sure what the number is on a Medicine Mondays perspective because we brought in video kind of late in the journey of this health content creation space. But I did not want to kind of just brush by the fact that we are hitting number 400. That is correct. The 400th podcast episode here on the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry. I mean, an amazing accomplishment to say the least, because I'm going to run down some numbers today on how many people get to 100 or just get to have a consistent podcast episode. But this episode isn't really going to be about me. It's really going to be about you, right? Because I'm going to have to continue to let you guys know in the Lunch and Learn community, or if this is your first time watching or seeing me or listening to me, especially if you listen to the podcast episode, I have to give a shout out to the community, right? Those who are listening, who want to empower themselves for better health, who want to think like a doctor without being overwhelmed with all of the information and unfortunately misinformation that is out there. So I have to make sure I start out this introduction saying thank you for being with us, for downloading, for subscribing, for sharing. The amount of times that I'll be out and about and someone recognizes me or someone says something, oh hey, you got that podcast, or my coworkers who I don't even realize that they listen to podcasts will tell me, we love your podcast, man. Which again is always flattering, right? Because thankfully I don't talk crazy about my coworkers, right? Thank God, right? But it's always flattering to hear that I am one of the voices they look forward to in their journey of becoming just a better version of themselves, especially when we talk about health-related topics, right? So I definitely want to make sure we get that intro started there before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of this special episode 400. And if you're my YouTuber watching and you have not subscribed to the podcast, the link will be in the said show notes, right? Please subscribe to the podcast. I like to have as many downloads as possible, even though it's not necessarily a number I track, but we want to run that up as well too, right? So let's talk about the journey, right, of getting to 400, what the steps and the obstacles, and more importantly, let's talk about what we have to look forward to after episode 400. All right, so I want to say, starting out, when I said, I want to do this thing called a podcast. I have an old blog post. I don't even know if it's still published anymore, but I remember starting out with my Lunch and Learns Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? I was an outpatient doctor and I felt troubled that my patients couldn't get enough information as far as their diabetes, their hypertension, their high cholesterol, and they didn't have enough time to talk to me, even though I was their doctor, because there was just constraints of, hey, you know what? I can't talk to everyone for an hour. And a lot of times the 15 to 20 minutes I may have to talk about them, I just knew it was not enough. So that's what kind of birthed this Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry. And I want to give a special shout out to a good friend of mine, Stephen Francis, because I think he was at my house one day and he said, man, I love your Lunch and Learns on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but unfortunately I don't necessarily have the time to kind of watch the video. Is there any way you can make that in an audio version? Now here I am, I'm a physician, outpatient doc, I didn't know what it meant to even start a podcast. I thought this was gonna be this huge burden and hill that I'd have to get over. But I had someone in my community, right, which is my friend Steven, who said, hey man, I would love to take what you're giving, but I can't digest it in that form. So I had to adjust. I said, all right, I'm going to learn, right? And I think the people I want to shout out right now, I think John Lee Dumas and, oh my God, I can't forget the second. I think his name is Pat. He has a podcast. Oh, I will put it in the show notes. But those two were the first two that said, hey, you know what? It is not difficult to start a podcast, and you probably need to start a podcast yesterday. And I was like, all right, why would a doctor start a podcast? Who would want to listen to a doctor talk about hypertension and high cholesterol? But I did it anyway. And we took, I believe, our first, I want to say 20 to 30 episodes of our Lunch and Learns, and we put them in audio format and we put them out to the world. And when people say to listen to podcasts, I always tell them, hey, go ahead and skip probably like the first 30 to 50 episodes, because I wasn't really that good. And when you're on this journey of trying to just start a podcast, you're not going to be good. I'm in episode 400 and I still think there are things that I could do better every single week. So understanding that, like, hey, you know what, it's not going to be great, but the most important thing is that it's out there, and that I would start having people, new patients, more importantly, say, hey, I listened to your podcast on diabetes or cholesterol, and I have an idea. I just had some follow-up questions, was very eye-opening to me, because now I had this avenue, or I had this window to be able to talk to people and not have to be in the room. And that was something that just blew my mind as a physician. I said, oh, you know what? Like, when I did my Lunch and Learns, like, I could see there's people on there. I could see people view it later. But like, now you have a podcast that kind of lives forever. And it was one of those journeys where, yes, there was a lot of hurdles, right? Just trying to record the first one, and then the second one, and then the fifth one, and then the 50th. And just like every iteration, every microphone, every camera, you know, every audio technique to try to make me sound like clearer, right, was something that was, again, it was a hurdle, right? And I want to tell you why, right? Because it wasn't just a hurdle for me, right? These are just some of the numbers, right? Because I had to go look this up, y'all. I know this is episode 400. I had to go look this up. Like, hey, how many people get to like 400, right? So these are just some of the stats. These are just some of the stats here that, like, honestly kind of blew my mind. In year 2023, there were 212,000 new podcasts. The year before, 244,000. The year before, 740,000. That's a pandemic year, so everyone was making podcasts. In the year 2019, 337,000 podcasts. But this is what makes the 400th episode so important. 90% of podcasts don't publish after 3 episodes. I want us to think about that. 90% of podcasts do not publish after 3 episodes. Of the remaining 10%, 90% quit after 20 episodes. So think about those numbers. Think about the outlier that you would have to be just to make it to episode 21, episode 31, 40, 100, 200, and where we're at today, 400. Think about what it takes to be consistent, especially from a podcast perspective, right? Like, if you've been following the Lunch and Learn Dr. Barry, we have plenty of solo episodes. We have plenty of guest episodes. We kind of mix and match. Sometimes we do education. Sometimes we're talking politics, public health. Like, there's so many different topics just within my little shell. But when I'm recording, a lot of times I'm just staring into a camera, and I'm just hoping that when I press publish, someone somewhere in some part of the world, right, will listen. As of June of this year, 2024, there are 460,000 active podcasts on Apple Podcasts. Half of those only have 3 episodes or fewer. And this is why I didn't want to necessarily brush by the fact that we're on episode 400, right? Especially because I don't do this by myself. I got a great team who over the years have like helped alleviate some of the stress and burden that it takes to create a podcast, right? I have a team now who I put a file somewhere and they now make the video for my YouTubers, right? Like, a lot of you should have noticed it over the past, like, probably 5 to 6 months. I'm not sure how long I've been working with them. You know, they've been doing a great job. Shout out to them, right, on the YouTube front. But my podcast team, right, like, they're able to take the audio, they're able to split the audio, they're able to promote it, like, they're able to do these things here, because at the end of the day, the important thing is making sure I get the message to you. And that has always been the biggest force. Because I have people all the time say, man, why do you do a podcast? Or why do you do what you do in general? Especially because my work, I don't have an outpatient office. I go to nursing homes, I go to the hospital, I go to long-term care facilities. So it's not as if I'm doing this to get another patient to come to my clinic. It's not the case. That probably hasn't been the case probably since like episode maybe 150, 200, right? But I continue to do it because I know that there's someone out there who circles their week to listen to, hey, what is Dr. Barry saying this week? What do I need to get on myself this week, right? All right, it's my hypertension, is the cholesterol, is the sleep apnea, right? Is it a diet, is it nutrition? Like, what do I need to get on this week that Dr. Barry is trying to help educate me on, right? Because again, the goal is empower yourself for better health. Think like a doctor, right? That's, again, if you only get 2 things from this podcast and from the platform in general is how do I think like a doctor without feeling overwhelmed with the amount of information there, and being able to kind of have that lifeline with Dr. Barry Pierre to say like, all right, you know what, Dr. Barry got me. Like that was kind of confusing, but the way he broke it down made it so much simpler, right? So it is and has always been this journey. So like even when I'm up to episode 400, I look forward to getting to episode 500 and 600 and even 1,000, right? Because it's one of those things where I just love doing what I do because I know there's a community out there, right, who didn't understand the importance of prostate cancer screening, didn't understand the importance of making sure you're following your diet or making sure your diabetes is under control. They probably did not understand that until they heard the podcast, or a family member heard their podcast and say, hey, did you get your annual checkup? Dr. Pierre says you should always get your annual checkup at least around your birthday so you don't forget. Did you get that done? And I know that's have saved lives. And that's the beauty, because I don't know all of the lives I saved. I just know that I have a voice, and in this profession of medicine, you do things because you want to change and you want to help foster positive change. So, and I know that I've done that over these, like, we're going on, I want to say 7 years. Let me see, because I started a podcast. Well, I started Lunch and Learns when I was in medical school, right? So that is around 2009. So I probably started doing podcasting maybe like 2014, yo. So it's over a decade. It's over a decade of podcasting, right? Where we have just release just podcast after podcast. And this doesn't even include what we do on the YouTube, because we release plenty of YouTube related things we're not necessarily keeping track of, right? So it's so much content out there because I know there's so much lives that need to be changed. And it's just a beauty to see my Lunch and Learn community hold me down over these years, even though it feels like I'm just talking, you know, in a quiet room to a random camera, and I don't know if you're going to listen. But the beauty is that I know you keep listening because you guys keep telling me you do. So what I want to just kind of talk about right now, before we, get this show on the road, is what have I learned? Right? Because I think that's important, right? Like, what have I learned? Because obviously what I do, the education, I know what you guys, the community, have taken, but what have I learned? I learned the importance of being consistent, right? As a physician, a lot of times is, we drive home the fact that, you got to read, you got to stay up to date. But sometimes consistency can kind of waver. And when I know that the podcast that I am recording is going to be someone's, thing that they listen to on their way to work, on their way, and if I don't record, they don't have nothing to listen to, like, it puts a little chip on my shoulder, right? So I learned that the importance of consistency. I learned the importance of having a passion. Because I think, especially when you hear the numbers of people who don't even make it past episode 3, because a lot of times it's not a passion for them. I say this all the time. We don't have sponsors on this podcast. We never have. Like maybe from episode 400 on, we'll start working on getting consistent sponsors, right? We've never really had sponsors on this podcast. So it's never been something where from a financial gain, like I needed to do it. No, I just actually love doing it. And because I had that passion to do it, it was much more easier to be consistent in doing it. So if you're an aspiring podcaster or someone who wants to get out there, understand, right, that those are probably going to be your 2 biggest driving forces in the beginning. In the beginning, right, the consistency has got to be there. Right. And like understanding that the passion has got to be there, because there may not be a lot of people, especially if you're not like a celebrity, right? I'm not a celebrity. If you're not a celebrity, there's not a lot of people, right, who are going to know who you are or what you're talking about in the beginning, right? There's not going to be a lot of people who even know of your podcast, right? Again, there's like Apple, what was that? 400,000 plus active podcasts on Apple Podcast, right? So yes, you are going to be in the sea of podcasts that are out there. But what's going to help differentiate you, help you stand out, is you're going to keep on going. The same way I tell my patients, you got to keep on going. Hey, I know the blood pressure seems difficult to control, but we got to keep on going. Hey, I know that diabetes, yeah, man, that's sugar. Oh my God. Like, the foods, yes, I understand, but we got to keep on going. Right? Like, understand that it's a passion that has to come within you, so that when you do have, lulls where you don't really want to record, or it doesn't, like, you're checking your numbers and it doesn't seem like a lot of people are listening, you still keep on doing it. And you keep on doing it to the best of your ability, so that what used to be, especially, again, I always say, when I go back to that first 30, maybe 50 episodes, it didn't sound great, but it got so much better over time because I just kept on doing it. So even when I do the video for my YouTubers, right? When I do this video, like the person that you're seeing right now is not the comfortable person that used to record when he was doing episode 1 to like 50, maybe even 75. I keep moving the number up because like I wasn't really that good. But it was the fact that like, I knew I had to turn this camera on. I knew I had a message to give to you because I knew if I didn't give that message, it'd be a message that may be life or death. And that's how I always started it. If I don't tell you about the newest, the disease or the newest vaccine or the newest treatment or the newest process of just making yourself healthier, like someone is not going to live because they didn't get the information from me. That's just something that I carry on my shoulder. No one's put that burden on me. But again, as a physician, this is what we do, right? And as a health content creator, because that was one thing too, I had to keep reminding myself, especially when you get to episode 400, hey, not only are you a physician, but you're a health content creator, right? That is a title that is important. That is a title that is vital, especially with the amount of misinformation and disinformation around. That is an important, vital title. So we can't shoo that. So understanding that all of these things are here got me to episode 400, and they are what's going to get me to episode 1000, right? Because I'm not going to stop, right? Lord willing, right? Lord willing, I'm not going to stop creating content, creating podcasts, creating, the stuff for you, because I know you as a community, you need it. And it is such a blessing, right? To continue to grow in this journey that I'm excited. Like I said, this episode I've been hyped about, right, to record, right, because I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I was talking to my team when we were around episode 370. I'm like, hey, when do we get to episode 400? Because it was just something that like I thought of. I was like, all right, I got to make sure that people in my community understand how appreciative I am of them pushing me to get to episode 400, right? Like the people who are in my Lunch and Learn community, people who are in my Facebook groups, people who are TikTok subscribers, Instagram subscribers, YouTube subscribers, like wherever you're at, like you are a part of the Lunch and Learn community who decided that, you know what, like I'm gonna listen to this guy talk about health because he seems very down to earth, right? He's not talking down at me, right? He's not hitting me with all these ridiculous educated words. Shout out to my physician colleagues, but sometimes we have a problem talking to just regular people, right? And he's just making it so much simpler for me to digest. And I thank him for it, and my family thanks him for it, right? Again, this is just what people are saying to me, right? So again, I'm excited, y'all. Like we got a lot of things planned for the podcast in regards to, guests. We're bringing more guests. Y'all know I love doing solo episodes. One of the reasons is because I don't have to worry about anyone else's schedule. But I know people like hearing from guests, so we got to do that. We're gonna get some guests on. We're bringing a much more significant onus on getting guests for episode 401 to 500. Right, like that'll be a thing that we'll do for you guys. We're gonna continue to help it grow to a level. Again, like I said, we're gonna work on trying to get a sponsor. Right, just because like you can't have too little marketing, right? I always argue that, like, especially with our company Autism in Black, right? Like we market all the time, right? Like in fact, we probably market Autism in Black much more than we do the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry, which is cool, not a problem, right? I love it, right? They're both my companies, so cool, either the same. But we're going to do a much more concerted effort, right, to market the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry, because again, I don't want to be you guys' best kept secret, right? We're going to make sure we're out there, we're out and about, and we're just going to continue to do for you guys what we know is important, which is bringing you the most up-to-date, factual, truthful information, but explaining it in a way that anyone can digest and then take to their PCP, their doctor, their family member, right? And then help them, right? So that, they can make it to the next holiday, without being decrepit or anything, right? So again, I am yours truly, very thankful, right? For all of your support over this, like, decade-long journey. Like I said, yeah, it's crazy to think. Decade-long journey of getting to episode 400. And I'm just hope that you are as excited as I am to see what it's gonna be like when we get to episode 500. See you guys next week.